Welcome to Breathing for Singing Part 2. In this video, we'll be discussing some of the more practical exercises and ideas to help you achieve the optimal singer's breath. Before we launch in, I want to encourage you to review the information from Part 1 for terminology and also to remind yourself of the anatomical events that occur when we're breathing. Number 2, check in with your alignment. It's going to be really impossible for you to take an optimal singer's breath if your alignment isn't working for you. So that may mean that you need to go back and review the alignment video before we launch into this as well. And number 3, and this is a big one, make sure that you're being patient with yourselves. These exercises will take you some time to master, so don't feel like you have to necessarily get them all at once, but I want to encourage you to revisit these exercises in your practice time. Stop and start this video in between the exercises and try them standing, sitting, or even lying down. You really also want to give yourself a visual for what's going on, so practice these exercises in front of a mirror as well. Let's launch in. So you may remember from Part 1 that we discussed the diaphragm dilemma. So we have no sensory receptors of the diaphragm, and we really don't have any direct control over what the diaphragm does. So how do we optimize our singing breath? We can do this in 3 ways. We can release the abdominal wall and pelvic floor. We can achieve a flexible and suspended rib cage, and we can achieve a flexible solar plexus. So let's start with the first one, a release in the abdominal wall and pelvic floor. So you may remember from Part 1, if the abdominal wall and pelvic floor are released, we're really allowing the diaphragm to be able to contract and descend lower, which is great for inhalation. So what you may not know, though, is that when our abdominal wall and pelvic floor release, we're also releasing the throat and achieving a relaxed laryngeal position, which sets you up for healthy singing. We'll talk more about that in a minute. So with this exercise, we first want to build a sense of awareness for this muscle area in our body. I want you to know you'll not do this exercise this extremely in singing. This is more about again, building awareness for where those muscles are and learning how to exercise them at will. So what I want you to do is place your hands on the lower abdominal area of your body and engage those muscles in your abdominal wall and pelvic floor. And you want to really kind of squeeze them, almost as if you're bringing that muscle group, that lower part of your torso, into your spine quickly and tightly, okay? And then just as quickly and tightly, you want to release those muscles. So it's a sudden release. So try that a few times until you feel like you can accurately map that muscle area and feel what it's like to engage those muscles and release them. After that's comfortable, coordinate that with your breath. So when you're engaging the muscles of the abdominal wall and pelvic floor, you're also exhaling all of your air. And then when you release the muscles, you're inhaling quickly and suddenly. So it'll look something like this. Blow all your air out, squeeze, and release. Try that a couple of times, and after that's comfortable, place your hand on your laryngeal area, Adam's apple, or that cricothyroid notch that bobs up and down when you swallow. And you'll want to feel what's happening on the inhalation as you're releasing those muscles in your abdominal wall and pelvic floor. You should feel a very slight downward motion of the Adam's apple. So as you're inhaling, you'll feel that slight drop in that area. So blowing everything out. Release. Good. And you can kind of work and play with that as well so that you're optimizing that release and opening in the throat with the release in the abdominal wall and pelvic floor. Next, we want to talk about flexibility in the rib cage. So we already discussed the importance of the rib cage as our diaphragm is actually connected to the lower part of your ribs. It's important that we understand and map correctly what our rib cage is doing when we're breathing, and that we really allow it to be flexible and to be suspended flexibly out and open when we're inhaling and when we're singing. So it's never locked, it's never forced or fixed. It's always flexible, but it is sort of suspending and springing out and open on the inhale. So first we want to build awareness for the rib cage, particularly the back ribs, which is where the majority of the lungs and which is where the majority and the volume of the air comes into your body. So cross your arms in front of your chest and inhale sharply through your nose, noticing the movement of the back rib cage on inhalation. And you can also try this in a seated position, bringing your elbows to your knees, inhaling sharply through your nose, noticing the movement of the back rib cage. And again, I would encourage you to pause this video in between each exercise and experiment with feeling the back rib cage move on the inhalation. This next exercise is an exercise to develop flexibility in the rib cage, which is hugely important. We never want our ribs to be stiff or locked, and we especially don't want to overbreathe, which when we overbreathe, we're kind of pushing our ribs out, forcing them out, and it kind of shoves too much air pressure through your throat. So this exercise helps with flexibility. So just first explore a simple pant, like you're a puppy dog panting. And place your hands on your rib cage and notice that outward and inward motion of the rib cage when you're panting. And again, that may take some time to develop, so you'll want to employ these exercises in your daily practice time. Next, you want to add some speaking. So it's helpful to speak those 5 Italian vowels when you're in between pants. So we'll do 3 pants and a vowel in between each set. So for example, I know this sounds complicated. Be patient with yourself. It'll go like this. E, E, ah, oh, ooh. Okay, so explore that for a few minutes. After that's comfortable, we'll add singing into that exercise. So find a comfortable middle range pitch, and we'll do it on a 5-tone scale. So this is how that exercise will go. E, E, ah, oh, ooh. So this exercise may feel a bit like patting your head and rubbing your belly. So it's a little bit awkward to coordinate, but give yourself some time and explore this panting exercise in your daily practice time. Next, we really want to achieve flexibility in the solar plexus. Now, the solar plexus is technically a bundle of nerves that kind of sits underneath your diaphragm, more central to your torso, but it's also a helpful diagnostician. It kind of shows us how flexible this whole area, this whole upper abdominal area is. And flexibility in this area is really important to allow the diaphragm to descend low onto the viscera. So what we really want to make sure that we're achieving is flexibility in this area. We never want this solar plexus area to be locked and stiff. And this is a huge problem for a lot of singers, of which I used to be the worst culprit. So I really want you to take some time with this exercise. It can be kind of advanced, so be patient with yourself when you're exploring this, and be patient with yourself as you work toward releasing that kind of locked area, if that's something that you struggle with. It really does take some time. Locking in the solar plexus not only inhibits the descent of the diaphragm onto the viscera, but it also contributes to tongue tension, unequalized breath flow, and difficulty with your high notes. So again, I really want to encourage you to develop a sense of awareness for that locking in that area. So it's just kind of below your sternum in that upper abdominal area. And you'll want to place your hand there as we do this exercise. So this is the chair exercise by David Jones. And what you'll want to do is sit straight up in a chair and pivot forward from your hip sockets. Place a hand over the upper abdominal area just underneath your sternum. And inhale and exhale freely a few times, noticing what that area is doing as you're inhaling and exhaling. Then you'll want to perform a strong hiss. Now, as you're hissing, you'll have one hand on the upper abdominal area and one hand on the lower abdominal area. Study the motion of the upper abdominal wall, especially as you move along that breath line. Also study what the lower abdominals are doing. Now, what you'll notice is on the hiss, the upper abdominal area, or that solar plexus area, is going to turn slowly. So it's staying flexible. It's not locked. It's just turning slowly, kind of like this. And the lower abdominal wall is stretching upwards slightly. So it's almost like we're engaging those lower abdominals upward. So it's like an upward stretch. And as we're doing this, our solar plexus is turning. So this is kind of what you'll notice in your abdominal area on this exercise as you're hissing. You'll notice, again, that's, and you may notice it more obviously toward the end of the hiss. So work on establishing that coordination, noticing that coordination before you add anything sung to it, okay? And the reason why this exercise is so important is that really is the coordination that we want in our abdominal area while we're singing. We want that solar plexus to be flexible and that upper abdominal area to stretch upwards slowly. So what you want to do is after you've established that coordination on the hiss, you'll want to hiss again and think a 5-tone scale, do, 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 do. And after you've thought it, directly after that, you'll sing a 5-tone scale, trying to capture the same feeling of elastic body engagement and release of the small airstream. So for example, I'm breathing in. So you're establishing that coordination just on the regular hiss, and then you're singing the 5-tone scale on the hiss as well. Feel free to ask me questions if this exercise is difficult or you need some clarification. So some of the references for this video are A Modern Guide to the Old World Singing by David Jones. And I would really encourage you to look into this book if you'd like some more practical exercises for breathing and singing in general. You can also follow David Jones on Facebook at the David Jones Voice Studio. And all of the images in this video come from what every singer needs to know about the body. Thank you so much and happy breathing.